and welcome to another Scots Whay Hae podcast. And today I'm joined by Jenna Gordon, who is the editorial director for Verve Books. Hello, Jenna.
Hi, Alistair. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And so what can you tell us about Verve Books? Give people who don't know a kind of overview.
Okay, so Verve Books was launched in 2018 as a sister company to Oldcastle Books, which is an indie publisher that was launched probably, I think, about 40 years ago by our head publisher. Verve was set up as we sort of do upmarket commercial / accessible literary fiction. And I joined the team in 2020. I started doing editorial work for them and began acquiring in the October of that year. So I think we describe ourselves as doing page-turning, diverse and original fiction from fresh and impactful voices. We've been doing about 12 books a year up until this year. We're doing 18, I think, this year. And then going forward, the aim is to do 24 per year. And we publish across all genres of fiction. And kind of broadly speaking, there is a definite vibe that links all the books in terms of the types of stories we're telling, the themes that they explore, the writing we're looking for tends to be plot and character driven. We're doing our first short story collection next year as well, which I'm excited about. So we're doing a lot. We're still in a phase of growing the list and the brand, but it's an exciting time to be part of the team.
I think it's these are such interesting and vital decisions in a small independent publishers. Is one, do you grow, and how quickly do you grow? There's obviously been examples of people who have perhaps tried to grow too quickly and it's not worked. So, I take it these are constant discussions that are going on.
Yeah, so we've been quite clear, at least in the editorial side of the path to growth in that sense, because it is just me acquiring at the moment. So there are like quite obvious limits to what I can do. So we've had this sort of, we start with doing one book per month. This year we're doing like 18, so 2 books one month and 1 book other months. And then, the idea being 2 books per month. So we're a team of 6 people working in-house, and then we work with a lot of freelancers. So I think we are constantly talking about, there's everything we obviously want to do, the growth that we imagine ourselves having, and all the exciting projects that we want to do and things. But then realistically, you've got we're a 6-person team in an indie publisher, so you're constantly balancing those two things. We have monthly sort of brand strategy meetings and things to assess where we're at and what our next goals are and things. It's a constant conversation.
And in terms of the role of editorial director, what does that entail?
So as you probably know from, I imagine you've spoken to loads of other indie presses, the editorial teams are small. So it's really, I'm doing a lot as the editorial director. My colleague Demi, who is our publishing assistant, she works part-time in editorial with me, and then partly across all the other aspects of the publishing house as well. But that's really it. So it's me and Demi kind of working on that. So the editorial director involves quite a lot in terms of, I'm doing the acquisition side of things, submission bidding. I'm working on edits. I do quite a lot of I do all the developmental edits myself when we're acquiring, books that we're taking the lead on. Demi's increasingly doing some edits too. You're working across probably things that in other publishers might be in other, given to other members of the team, in terms of like there's a lot of admin involved as well. But I like the range of the job, in the sense that you're working across all areas of the edit. It includes doing things like cover briefs as well. The job is busy, but I like it that way, and I like being across everything, and I like working closely with all the other members of the team as well on various parts, like even the publicity. When you're working at an indie and you're the editor, you're working quite closely on that, and then vice versa. I mean, the publicity and marketing, my colleagues feed into aspects of the process too, like cover design, cover copy, and even submission reading. Like we do a lot of like in the editorial meetings, everyone's involved in that, so they're reading as well. It's very collaborative, and I like it that way. I think it's a perk of working in indie publishing.
You have to kind of wear a lot of different hats at different times.
Yeah.
But I think one of the, because I've worked with an indie publisher a while ago now, but one of the joys of having a small team, as you say, is that you can get together and discuss all of the aspects that you're talking about. So I can remember sitting and talking about covers of books. I mean, it's not just you're editing books. As you've just explained, there's so much more to kind of cover, and you have to learn quite quickly, I think, as well, these different aspects of it. And you spoke about sometimes working with freelancers. Is that editors? Is that publicists? Who's that?
We work with freelance editors on, I mean, copy edits and proofreads, and some of them we do in-house ourselves. Me and Demi will do them, but as we've been growing the number of books that we do, my time's mostly taken up with reading and doing the developmental edits. So we use freelancers on the copy edits and proofreaders where we need them. We also use freelance cover designers. We don't have an in-house design team. And not in terms of publicity and marketing, we do all that ourselves in-house. So my colleagues Lisa and Sarah, and then Demi as well, works on that side of things. So they've done really well, actually, I think, themselves, and in terms of getting the brand out there in the last couple of years. They're a really a powerful team. They're great to work with.
For people who maybe don't know, what's developmental editing? Is that initial stuff?
Yeah, so when I buy a manuscript, if I'm taking the lead on the edit for it, it's usually come through an author or an agent who've probably done some redrafts and things, but the idea would be is that when I first get it, I would perhaps work into it further, maybe ask them to do another redraft or whatever with my editorial feedback taken into account. So developmental is, some people call it structural as well. So it's looking at things like plot and story and character, and making sure those elements of the book all work and helping the writer communicate their ideas and their story as effectively and clearly as possible before it then gets to the stage where you're editing the language and doing the copy and the line edits.
Yeah, the line to line editing and the proofreading, as you say, comes later on. I'm going to ask you later on about advice for people who are looking to get published, but the editor, when you get something I take it I've spoken to a couple of writers recently, one of whom says, "Oh no, I don't give anything in until I've edited the heck out of it, and it's as far as they're concerned, it's ready to go." I've spoken to another one who said there was a huge plot thing that the publisher hated, so it came back, and that had to get done almost completely from scratch. I guess you would prefer the former to the latter, but is that part of the way that you make choices on what books to take?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So there are obviously, like you kind of say there are different levels of developmental editing, obviously depending on how the manuscript comes in. So I'm always looking at complete manuscript. I'm never buying anything based off of proposals. That's just right. Just our what we are looking for. But I think so sometimes I'll do like 2 book deals with authors. So like when you get the first book and then you're kind of buying the second one, and at that point it is just a proposal or an idea. I mean, in those instances, it can come in like, I mean, I can get involved. An author will send me their 1-page plan for the book, and that can be quite helpful to even get involved at that stage, because it avoids them writing a manuscript that has a huge plot point that I don't like later down the line, or I don't think works. But I mean, even where the finished manuscript comes in, I always, like the idea that the author would be open to edits is important to me too. So maybe sometimes you don't want an author to come in thinking it's completely finished, because then if I come back with loads of edits, they might not be as open to collaborating on it. So it's quite a complicated answer to your question. I'm open to, I don't think there's any one type of manuscript that's easier to work with. A lot of it comes down to like how open the author is to collaborating and how the relationship is with you. I think that's important to me when I'm acquiring books, is that if I can clearly see the author's vision and I can see that our visions for the book are aligned, then I'm hopefully confident that we'll get on working together. And I think that's the main thing that needs to be there for an edit to work. You need to both feel like you're on the same page and trust each other throughout the process. And then in terms of the editing I do as well, like I'm not ever giving editorial advice, like you have to take that plot point out. It's never compulsory edits, it's always just advice, because my logic is if I've bought the book as it was when it came in, then I have obviously liked it enough to read and buy it. So it works as it is. The type of editing I'm doing is usually just to polish it, as opposed to, it usually works on its own.
And that word trust, I think, is a hugely important one between the writer and the editor. And most writers I've spoken to over the years have a very close, they've often got editors that they work with, and that, that relationship is kind of solid. So yeah, it's a very interesting relationship, because you are dealing with, it's one thing for writers to kill their own babies. I think when editors are suggesting they do it, it can be a very different thing. So before we move on to more about Verve, can you tell us about some of the publications you've got coming out that people might be interested in?
Yeah, so in terms of what we've got coming up, I mean, this month we have a book called Isaac by Curtis Garner. It's a debut novel, and I worked on the whole edit with Curtis. It was a really collaborative process. It was a direct submission as well, which is often my submissions come through agents, but Curtis is a book blogger, and he reached out to us about his book, and I read it and immediately connected with it. And then we spent, I think this was about a year and a half ago now, so only now it's coming out. So it's been quite the edit and the campaign has been building for quite a while. So it's exciting to see it finally come out. So this is a queer coming of age story. He's been describing it as a grinder novel set in London, and it's centering on a boy called Isaac who has he's 17, and it's his last summer before he goes to university, and he downloads a dating app for the first time and has a kind of he plans to have a summer of flings, and then he very quickly meets this older guy called Harrison who's 28, and they begin a relationship that quickly becomes very imbalanced and quite toxic. And the whole novel is centered on that one summer and the sort of growth that Isaac experiences through having this relationship. So that's one that we're excited about at the moment. Next year, big books for us. We've got The Heap Earth Upon It, which is the second novel by Chloe Michelle Howarth, who's the author of Sunburn, which was a book that we published in June 2023. That, I mean, it's been exciting to see what's happened with that book. It's been up for like 4 different awards this year. It's on the Polari shortlist, so we're waiting to see what happens with that at the end of this month. But yeah, her second novel is a gothic story set in 1960s Ireland about a family, and they've got a secret, and it's kind of narrated from the perspective of these three siblings and then a local woman in this small town that they moved to. It's exploring themes of, you know, secrets and grief and sapphic obsession as well. And I think it's really gonna appeal to fans of Sunburn, but then also bring in fans of Gothic and historical novels too. And we're really excited for that. So that's coming in October. And in the summer, we're doing a book called Senflowers, which is, it's as you mentioned earlier, it's by Emily Buchanan, who is coming to our blogger mixer that we're doing in Waterstones, Sauchiehall Street, in a couple of days' time. So it's Emily's debut novel. She used to work for Greenpeace, and she's now written a novel it's about the climate, it's about grief. It centers on this one woman whose boyfriend has been killed at a climate protest. They're both activists, and she's currently been grieving him for a few months. At the start of the book, when you meet her, she's fallen out of activism. She can't imagine herself being in those settings anymore since the loss of her partner. And then a houseplant gets delivered to her house, and she doesn't know where it's come from. She sprinkles her boyfriend's ashes into it, and then she believes that he's become the houseplant. She believes he's been reincarnated. So the book's basically about her, how she gets through her grief while having conversations with Ed, the houseplant. And it explores her kind of coming back into herself, but also finding a way back into activism that feels more right for her than perhaps what she was doing prior to Ed's death. So that's one we're excited about. We're coming out hopefully with a cover design for that soon and getting early proofs in the new year.
And how far ahead do you plan in terms of your books?
It depends how I'm getting on with buying them, basically, because I only buy things I like. So it depends how much that I like that I'm getting sent. We're pretty full for next year in terms of the list. There's maybe, yeah, no, I'm kind of looking at 2026 now. So I guess you would say that's just over a year ahead that I'm planning, which maybe is different to other publishing houses. But then I mean, this is probably the furthest ahead I've ever been. Sometimes we are still squeezing things in, you know, less than a year ahead. It just depends what the book is as well. If I'm taking the lead on the edit, it does need a bit more time. But if I'm buying books in from the US or Australia or other, where it's been published by a publisher there already, or where they've already worked through the edit, then we can do it a bit more quickly, because you're kind of hopping onto a process that's already been started. And in that instance, then the focus is mainly on just building the campaign rather than doing an edit.
Well, I mean, it's one of the things about growing the company is that your time is more stretched, and therefore, but one of the great things I think about independent publishers is you can build relationships with writers that perhaps it's almost impossible to do with bigger companies who, you know, have got a big release almost on a weekly basis. That's what my experience is. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we do offer at Verve is, because the list is smaller, every book gets attention in a way that I've never worked at a bigger publisher, but I imagine it's maybe not quite the same there. The capacity that we have for me to be involved in all the edits and dealing with every single author personally. And I mean, like I was saying earlier, we're a very collaborative team across departments. So by the time we even acquire a book, sometimes everyone in the team has already read it. So you kind of know going in that the person in PR and marketing has already read the book, and the whole team's got a shared vision for it before we acquire it, which I think can be, I think it works well when you're working with an author, for them to feel confident that everyone on the team knows the book well, and not only knows it well, but knows it like inside out, and is working yeah, it has the shared vision for the book that they have and their editor has, and everyone's on the same page. And we do, I think, I mean, yeah, I know that our authors do feel that they're, you know, we're checking in with them all the time and keeping them very involved, and even in things like the cover design, we really value their input and things like that. It's just how we've always done it, and I think it works, and I like working that way because I think a book is a very personal thing, and I think, you know, it feels natural to keep the authors involved as much as we possibly can. But like you say, like, as the list is growing, that's something we've been talking about as well, is how to make sure that we're still able to offer the same, in terms of like author input and things, and author care, and without, yeah, we don't want to have to compromise on that, basically, just because we're expanding. So yeah, those conversations are happening all the time.
I know some writers who perhaps were with indie publishers and then, you know, move on to bigger houses, do sometimes feel that that personal relationship is lost just because it becomes part of a kind of much bigger process. And what's your view on independent publishing in Scotland today? There's an easy question for you to answer, but you know, yeah, how do you view it?
I view it as, I'm always being Scottish. So although Verve is based, like, I mean, it's, our office is just outside of London in Harpington, but everyone works remotely. So I, as the Scottish editor, I'm particularly intrigued by the Scottish scene, and I like that we have the link up here. I like being, I'm based in Glasgow, so that's kind of, having the opportunity to work up here is something that um I I don't think I would have been able to do without COVID happening. Actually, I think it's really opened up being able to work remotely, and decentering, you know, publishing from London. But yeah, I mean, I've like, since before I've worked in publishing, I've been paying close attention to publishers like 404 Inc. and Charcoal Press, and I just, those are the kind of, I think there is a lot that's exciting happening in the independent publishing scene up here, and it feels like that's only gonna, you know, keep going. I think just anytime I, you know, see something in the bookseller about Scottish publishing, it only ever seems to be a positive thing at the moment. I mean, just, it just feels like there is an energy, particularly post-pandemic, where the possibilities seem more available than ever for things to be happening outside of London for publishing. Not even exclusively in Scotland. I think there's even things happening in the north of England, publishers coming up, and it feels, it just feels like an exciting time to be part of the indie publishing scene.
And why did you want to get into publishing? What was the desire?
My answer is really stupid. I, as a child, always loved reading and kind of writing as well. And then I watched the Christmas film The Holiday. Jude Law's character is an editor, and I remember watching that for the first time when I was about 8, and I asked my mom if it was a real job, and she said it was. So that kind of sparked the idea, and then obviously I grew up, and still found myself really enjoying reading and English and everything at school. I just kind of made it my mission to find out how to get into publishing, and become a book editor. And I mean, Jude Law makes it look really glamorous and relaxed in the film The Holiday, and I don't know where he's working at, but I think, I mean, I seem to have mirrored it in some sense. I work remotely most of the time. I come to London every sort of month or every 6 weeks, depending on whether there's meetings and things that need to be done. I go to the book fairs, but otherwise I'm kind of working remotely at my desk, editing and reading, and it is, you know, it is kind of, it's exactly what I thought it would be in that sense. So that's my incentive for working in publishing. But yeah, I mean, being part of a company like Verve, where I've very much had my career kind of growing with the brand as it's growing, has been exciting too. And I think I've definitely had the chance to experiment and learn, like, as the list has been finding itself as well, which I think it's been a cool way to learn and to come into publishing feeling like I feel very supported in my job to be able to take risks and try new things and buy books that maybe are of a genre that we've not tried before, but we're going to do it anyway and see what happens. And I like that side of things.
I think there's something hugely exciting about being involved in a still fairly young company, and as you say, been involved in the growth of it. And you mentioned that you're going to have a showcase at Watson's on the 13th. Unfortunately, that will have passed by the time this comes out. But I wanted to ask you about the importance of book events and other book-related things which help to publicise. These are increasingly important, it seems to me.
Yeah, so we do the book event that's happening in a couple of days' time is a blogger mixer. It'll be, I think, the third one that we've done. So we just post kind of COVID, when things started opening up again and events and things became more possible off of Zoom, we started doing these blogger mixers. We'd seen online throughout the pandemic that a lot of a key thing for our books that we're doing, we're kind of gaining a lot of traction, was that they were gaining reader support on social media, particularly on Instagram and then on TikTok as well. And we've kind of been building contacts like with those bloggers and things who've been supporting our books, and a lot of them are based in London but also up and down the UK. And we kind of thought, well, there's this really strong book community online that we've seen through COVID. Wouldn't it be nice to offer those people a chance to actually meet in person and meet each other and be able to talk in person about the books that they've all been reading and got excited about? But then also at these events, we bring authors too, so they get the chance to meet authors as well. And it's authors that their books are coming. So for this one, their books are coming next year. So it's kind of showcasing, giving them an early preview of books that are coming out, which is, I think, an exciting thing for them, but and for us, because it's good to see what books they're getting excited about ahead of publication. So those have been really good in terms of building relationships with readers, which is a hugely important part of the brand building side of things. I mentioned earlier how that's been a kind of big aim for us over the last few years. We do I just think events are really, they're good for, in terms of building relationships with bookshops, which especially indie bookshops. I think we do a mix of events with indies but also Waterstones as well. Some of our blogger mixers have been, one of them was an indie bookshop. We change it each time, so I think it's equally important to have in different bookshops, because it's all so important in terms of getting our books out there, getting authors known, and then also Verve as well.
And the kind of resurrection is the word I'm going to use of indie bookshops in particular. Has that kind of been a welcome surprise? Because it has to me. There was lots of talk, particularly when some of the bigger bookshops closed around the country, that, it's all going to be online and everything. But the bookshops have become really important to communities and to writers and publishers themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think I am surprised in the sense that it did feel kind of bleak for a while, but then I do think post-pandemic there maybe is an appetite to go out and do things a bit more. And I mean, as I this is just all my personal perspective, but as well, I think increasingly people are looking for alternative things to do, you know, like than going out on a night out and things. People are looking for more sober activities, particularly young people. And I do think that having indie bookshops like is a place to go, and especially when they're doing events, and I mean a lot of them host book clubs and all of these things, it does just feel like there's a new appetite for that post pandemic.
I think it's really interesting. I didn't think about it at the time, but some of the things you've mentioned, I think really do link together. You know, you just said there about the situation post-pandemic, and I think there was a lot of people at the time during COVID. One, books became such an escape because you couldn't really do anything much else. You know, if you kind of, you know, put things like Netflix to the side, books became really important. A really strong book community started to grow and emerge online, particularly things like Bookstagram on Instagram and on TikTok as well. And then these people, you know, you're talking about having the events like you're having at Waterstones. People wanted to get together and actually meet each other because they'd become friendly, or at least become kind of linked online, and now they could get out again and do it. And I think it's almost in a short space of time, almost hothoused a new generation of book lovers.
Yeah, and I think you have, I mean, in Glasgow, there's quite a few indies, in Edinburgh too, that I think are just these really cool spaces. I think in particular, I mean, I live quite near it, but Categories Books in Glasgow is a really cool space that's doing a lot for their thing is queer fiction, and I just think it's spaces like that are so important, and they do so many events, and they're really championing voices from, you know, bigger publishers, but also indies as well. And yeah, bookshops like that, and then they build a community around themselves, and then in turn it extends to building this community around the books that they choose to put in their bookshop. It's important for publishers as well that these sort of bookshops exist, and it's been really, I think it's really nice to see well, yeah, exciting to see them, more and more of them pop up. And then places like Book Bar in London are really, like, they're really cool, and there's loads of new bookshops kind of in that vein as well, popping up everywhere up and down the country now. It's really cool to see. It kind of ties into what you asked earlier about Scottish publishing and publishing outside of London. Like, as new publishers come up, there's also these new indie bookshops coming up, and it just feels like it kind of goes hand in hand, and it's exciting. And I think as well, when you see in cities where like one independent bookshop pops up, it kind of then makes it feel like it's possible for other people to do the same. And I think it all, you know, yeah.
I think for so long people were almost told, well, the bookshop's on its way out, and actually to see the amount that have started up and how they are curated by book lovers themselves, you know, there's a real kind of enthusiasm there. It does allow people, in fact, just as I'm talking to you, there's a new bar opened up in Glasgow, and I've not been yet, but it's made to look like a bookshop. Do you know the one I mean?
Yeah, the Last Bookstore. I'm really excited. I'm planning on going this week, actually. I've not been either, but I think the fact that even the bookshop is being used as an aesthetic for a bar, I think just shows how, I don't know, how the attitude to bookshops at the moment, they feel cool. Like, it feels like a cool place to go. And obviously this new bar having a bookshop aesthetic, it kind of, yeah.
It's I think they use the old John Smith sign, or an old John Smith bookseller sign there, so they're really kind of pushing it. I can't wait to go as well. And last couple of things I wanted to ask you was about advice for other people, because we have a lot of people listening to the podcast, one who might be interested in publishing, but also in being published. So first of all, do you have advice for anyone thinking about getting involved in publishing? How would they kind of go about that?
Yeah, so I mean, I did an internship when I was at uni, which I think internships and like those sort of opportunities are important in kind of getting a foot in the door, I think. I mean, I did an internship at Oldcastle Books, which is obviously how the link to Verve is. But in terms of other things you can do, I mean, gaining experience in whatever aspect of publishing you'd like to go into is important. It doesn't have to be necessarily through a publishing company directly. Like, I think doing things like I was editing people's essays at uni, like as like it was like a formal volunteer proofreading program thing. I think all of those sorts of things help. I in terms of if you're actually looking for your first job, check all the job boards, go on LinkedIn. Um, Also there's loads of networking events and things, which I think, I mean, I know there's loads and loads in London, but if you're looking outside of London as well, I think going to book events and things like we've been talking about can be valuable as well, because if you just start speaking to people, the book communities are really friendly, and more often than not you'll find out that you'll be speaking to someone at an event and they're actually involved in the industry somehow, and it's good to kind of just link like through that way too. There are loads of routes in. I think immersing yourself in book events and that can really be one of them. And then online as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be in person. I mean, I think if you're into books and you're kind of on social media reviewing them
Yeah.
and things, it does, if you don't have to be a huge influencer, you just need to kind of, if you're online showing your enthusiasm for books, that can even be helpful in terms of getting you noticed in a job interview and things like that.
Yeah, if you can show some working, I think that you've actually done it in the past. And book bloggers and online reviewers, I think if you've got a kind of back catalogue, if you like, and you've been shown to support books already, that can be a big thing. And what about writers? The question if I do book events and I'm chairing book events, nearly always there'll be somebody asking, do you have any advice on how I get published?
Yeah. Okay. So it depends what route you kind of want to go. I mean, some like I do a mix of, we'll sometimes have our direct submissions open so authors can submit that way. I also work with lots of agents too. It just depends what your what your goals are for your book. And I mean, obviously getting an agent is the sort of advice that everyone would say, but also look into what publishers are open to direct submissions. I think as well, if you've got a book that's if you've never been published before and you're submitting your book out, I think having the finished book does help, like as in having a complete manuscript, but then also, like I said earlier, going in prepared that if it does get taken on by someone, being open to like working into it further and collaborating on the edit. But I think it does help to show that if you're a debut author and having your finished manuscript, you are committed to finishing the book,
Yeah.
probably. And then from there, work, like I think how you pitch is really important. So maybe looking into how, like, well, you've got your finished manuscript, but how are you going around pitching it, whether you're pitching it to an agent or a publisher, making sure you're kind of hitting all the points that they're going to be interested in the first instance, like your kind of elevator pitch for the book, making sure it's as refined as possible, aligning it with other titles or things in the culture that are hot topics at the moment can be helpful. It makes your book seem like it's an urgent and current thing that people, this is why they should want to publish it. I think as well, if you finished your manuscript, but like you're the only one who's read it, maybe see if you can immerse yourself in like writing communities as well. I think a lot of the authors I work with are part of writers groups, and they find that really helpful in terms of getting perspective on their manuscripts before it sees an agent or an editor and before they start submitting it out. And because you're all in the same boat working on each other's manuscripts, it probably, I think it feels quite it can maybe feel like the feedback is more collaborative and like a shared experience. If you're both writers, you'll know what will be helpful to hear and things. And also I think even those groups throughout, if you and your other people in your group are all going through publication together at various publishers, I think even that part can be helpful in terms of having other people to talk to about the publishing process, especially if it's your first time going through it. So I really do think writers groups are good too.
And also, as you said, as you suggested, with people maybe wanting to get into publishing, going to book events, asking questions. Lots of book festivals often have panels which are about getting published as well. So, go and there's a lots of people out there. And as you mentioned, my experience is really supportive people that are, looking to kind of offer advice and give you help when they can. Jenna, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. It's been a real pleasure.
No, thank you for having me. It's been wonderful to be here.
And we'll be back soon with someone completely different.